Hello YouTubers and fellow hams. Well, it's the end of the summer finally. The temperatures have broke and started to trend down. And down at my first stop on my winter loop, Quartzsite, it's finally gotten below 100 degrees. Let's see, 100 degrees Fahrenheit is somewhere around 40 Celsius, I think. You can do the math. It's hot. But it finally got below that point. Still going to be hovering in the mid 90s for the high points for the next couple of weeks, but I can deal with that. That's not too bad. So it's time to hit the road and head south. And as usual, before I move, I usually do one of these travel vlogs just to let everybody know what's going on. I know some of you don't like these. I always get comments from some people that say, oh, you're already wasting time with this. Whatever, dude. A lot of people do like this. They like to know what's going on with me. And I get a lot of comments from people saying, we like the travel vlogs. So I'll keep doing them. So anyway, I spent the entire summer at Kingman this year, staying at Tony and Jeannie's place. And it started out pretty good. I got there and settled in, and Jeannie's horse Bran was, you know, he liked to wander around the property, and he'd follow me on my walks and bump me in the back with his nose to remind me that he's there in case I had an apple core for him, which usually I did. Loved that horse. He was like a big puppy. But a month or so later, he got sand colic. It was new to me, and for those of you that don't know, colic is when a horse's digestive tract binds up or plugs up. And most of the time, as I understand it, it's fatal. When that happens, all you can do, at least according to the vet's advice and what they were doing, is you put oil, cooking oil or something down their throat to try to soften things up and walk them around. They'll want to lay down. I mean, they really just want to lay down and die. But if you keep them walking and keep things moving, sometimes that breaks up the blockage and can save their life. Sadly, in this case, though, it didn't work. Boy, Tony and Jeannie, and I think even James helped them. They stayed with the horse and kept him on his feet and walked him often, all day long, well into the night. But around midnight, he went down for the last time and died, and it was very sad. I really missed him, and of course Jeannie and Tony, they'd had Bran for more than 20 years, I think, or close to 20 years. I don't know, quite a while, a long time. They'd had that horse for a long time, so they were very sad for a while. And I kind of missed him. I got used to when I would step out my door, he'd see me and he'd whinny at me, just in case I had an apple core, you know, and I'd whinny back at him, and he'd whinny back at me, you know. Yeah, I missed that horse. Yeah, it was kind of a rough summer. It started out that way, and then I wanted to see the Arizona monsoon season. Last year I was up in Oregon. The year before, I think I went down to Texas in the summer, and I didn't really see it, so I thought I'm going to stay here this year and see what the monsoon season is like. And it's no joke. Later July through August, or actually into July, mid-July or so through August, every single day there were massive storms popping up all around us and moving past and sometimes hitting us. Storm after storm after storm every single day. I hardly had my antennas hooked up for very long. Try to hook them up in the morning to check into a net, but I'd have to unhook them because the storms are coming through. And up there at 3,500 feet, the lightning and the electricity in the air, well, you're just, you know, you're closer to the cloud layer. And every time a storm would go by, you could hear the antenna feed line crackling with the static that was on it. In fact, one time I went to unhook the doublet and got a shock off the feed line as I was unhooking it. Big static shock. So it's no joke. And then, of course, I did the video on the one direct hit that we had from that massive storm cell. It was huge, and it hit us dead on. It was really intimidating watching it approach. And then when it hit, it was 40 to 50 mile an hour sideways rain-driven wind, or wind-driven rain. I was in the RV for part of that, and it was really intense. And then after the storm, as many of you already know from the video, about 15 minutes later I was posting pictures of the storms and I heard a rushing sound and went outside to discover that we had a flash flood coming down the road. And it was a dirt road, and it turned into a river for hours. The water came across the property and caused some damage there. Didn't damage the RV, it only barely got up to the rims on the wheels. But it was really quite something, and they had to rebuild the road after that. Kind of funny, that video, it did really well, probably from the subject matter. Last time I looked, it was over 60,000 views. And the comments I was going through, and a lot of people, you know, Captain Obvious was all over the comments on that about Tony's house. Yeah, he knows that the foundation is too low to the ground, and that's between him and his contractor. I was keeping my nose out of it. But he knows that, but, you know, lots and lots of people, I guess, thought that they were educating others that didn't see what was right in front of their face, with the foundation being too close to the ground. But there were a couple of guys, I had a couple of trolls pop up and try to point out that I was an idiot because this is not a monsoon. And they would cut and paste the Wikipedia definition of a monsoon. I just responded to them with a link to the Arizona State University's page on the Arizona monsoon season and how it works. But you'll have that. You know, you always got trolls like to pop up and try to start something. And best thing to do is just ignore them. But in this case, I figured I'll just send them information on the Arizona monsoon season. That's what they call it at the university. And it's in the meteorological department, you know, so I guess they're an authority, right? Anyway, yeah, it was storm after storm after storm. So yeah, not fun. Not gonna sit there next summer. In fact, next summer I'm kind of hoping COVID will have finished burning through the population, and I'll probably take a long 2-month meander back east. In fact, I'm starting to plan that and look for destinations along the way, state parks and that where I can park. The thing about traveling with such a big RV is every night you have to find some place to park, and this thing is huge, you know. Walmart, if you go in and buy something and you're parked at the back of their parking lot, generally they'll let you stay overnight. So there's been a few times where it's been, you know, late and I'm driving and I need a place to park, and Walmart has been the only option and saved my butt. But on the trip back east, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to research state parks along the route and keep the drives short. Try to do no more than maybe 200 miles a day, which is about my limit physically. The drive down here from Kingman, by the time I got down here, I was getting a little lightheaded. So yeah, try to find places where I can overnight in state parks along the way, you know, and spend a couple of weeks at this state park, a couple of weeks at that one, a couple of weeks at that one, and just slowly make my way back east and you know, spread the time out. The other reason being the Patreon payment comes in at the end of the month, and between that and YouTube, that's my only income, so it's going to be an expensive trip. I'm probably going to be spending more than $2,000 just on fuel to go all the way back east and come back out here. At least $2,000 on fuel for sure. This thing gets about 5 miles to the gallon unless I have a tailwind. So yeah, that's probably what I'll do. I'll spread it out and maybe make it a month and a half out east and a month and a half back here and spend the summer basically on the road, and then do videos along the way at the state park stops. So that's kind of the plan for next summer. But right now it is the end of the summer, beginning of fall, and I'm headed south to Quartzsite, Arizona, and I'll spend a little while there until it starts to get cold, probably later November, and then I'll go down to the Yuma spot at the Senator Wash and hang out with the other hams at the Rat Pack there through the winter, and then come back up here to Quartzsite in the spring, and then up to Kingman, visit with Tony and Jeannie for a month or so, and then head east. That's kind of the plan. The drive down here was fine. My original plan for the travel day was dump the tanks, get an oil change because it was time, and then hit the road. And that seemed to be going well. Although when I drove out of Tony and Jeannie's place, I went down to a service station and got the propane tank filled up, which was almost empty. I didn't think I used that much propane over the summer. All I was using it for was making coffee and cooking. I was plugged into power at Tony and Jeannie's place, so I didn't need the fridge running off of it. But it was almost empty, so I filled it up and put some fuel in the RV. And then I headed to the oil change place. And when I stepped out at the oil change place, I smelled propane. And I thought, uh-oh. I went to the service hatch to take a look, and I could hear, oh crap, you know. So I turned off the valve, got some soapy water, and turned the valve on and discovered that the regulator had failed. The propane regulator. The propane was coming out of the seam around the side of it. So after the oil change, I had to go to an RV place and get a new regulator put in. And now I've got a nice shiny new propane regulator and the system's working again. So yeah, unforeseen problems. You know, when you're living in an RV, it seems like every couple of months or so you're fixing something that breaks. And the next repair I think I'll have to do is replacing the check valve on the water pump. Because when I turn on the water pump now, it pressurizes the lines and then it stops. It's got a pressure switch in it. But after about 20 seconds or so, it'll pulse again. So there was a leak, right? So I went through and looked everywhere in the water lines and didn't see any leaks. So it must be the check valve is leaking back into the pump and water tank and letting the pressure out, and the pump's repressurizing it. So I guess I'm going to have to replace that check valve next. I'll do that sometime this winter. As it is now, and as it is usually, I turn on the pump when I need water, like if I'm going to make a cup of coffee or wash up or something, and then I turn it off. I don't leave it on all the time. That would just be a waste of power, and why keep the lines fully pressurized if I'm not using water? If there is a slow leak that develops somewhere, I would only find it after the water saturated the floor or the wall or something, and so I leave the pump off most of the time. And that's, you know, when you're living in an RV, you've got to develop habits. I updated my solar a little bit. I got rid of the big heavy AGM battery that I had here in the desk. I had a 100 amp hour marine grade AGM battery, and it weighed about 130, 140 pounds, really heavy. But I replaced that with an Ampertime 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. And I'm liking that. First off, it was only 25 pounds, so I shed over 100 pounds of weight on the RV, which is good. The lighter I can make it, the better. I'm riding right at the top edge of its weight limit, and I already had one tire blowout. It was an old tire, but I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to stress the tires, so anything I can do to remove weight, I do. But with the Ampertime battery, I also upgraded my charge controller to a version that has a serial connection and a Bluetooth module. And I've got an app on my tablet that I can monitor what the solar system is doing, which is nice. I haven't had that really. I haven't had a way to really monitor or record how much power the panels are producing, how much of it I'm using. And now I do, and it's been very interesting. I use, on average, about 30 amp hours of power per day. I can tell by looking at the charge controller tells me how much has been drawn from the solar panels, and since they are the source for all of my energy, that's an indication of how much power I'm consuming. So yeah, about 30 amp hours a day, which a lot of you are probably raising an eyebrow and going, that's it? Well, everything's really efficient. I have a little module for the laptop that takes the 12 volts directly to 19 volts, so I don't have to run a 120 volt inverter and then bring that back down. And in testing that when I was first building out the RV, I discovered that was 42% more efficient for running the laptop. And that's working just fine with my System 7.6 laptop. Most of these modern laptops require 19 volts on their input. And so having that little module lets me take the 12 volt from the solar system direct to 19 in one stage instead of, an inverter and then the laptop's power supply. More efficient. So I apply that methodology as everywhere I can. Everywhere that I can, I'm running directly off the 12 volts. In fact, I haven't had my inverter turned on in months. I turn it on if I need to use a power tool or the oscilloscope or the soldering station, things like that. So I only turn it on when I need it. Nearly all the time I'm just running directly off 12 volts for everything. And that's why my power usage is so low. I don't watch TV. I've got a little TV over there, but I haven't had it turned on in 6 or 7 months. My laptop is my home entertainment center. It runs through I've got a stereo amplifier that's running directly off 12 volts, powering a couple of nice speakers. So I watch TV shows and movies on the laptop. The phone is being charged directly off of a USB hub, which is powered by a 5 volt regulator I've made with several 7805s in parallel. And that, again, is a little more efficient than running an inverter and then running the cell phone's charger. I do have a small inverter that I have up here, an old Radio Shack inverter that's 150 watt that I've had for decades. It still works. I can use that to fast charge the phone if I need to, but most of the time the USB hub with the 5 volt source keeps the phone charged up. And the tablet as well, and the camera. I charge the camera off that, so I've made things as efficient as possible, and it's paid off. Today is cloudy. It's very cloudy. In fact, we got storms coming in this afternoon, and I'm only getting about 4 amps off of the solar panels. But with the laptop on just a little bit ago, I was only drawing about 2, so I was charging the battery even with it being fully cloudy. So yeah, my solar setup is not very impressive. 200 watts of panels and 100 amp hour of battery. But as I said, now that I've been able to track it, oops, I bumped my microphone. Now that I've been able to track it, I know that I'm only drawing about 30 amp hours on average a day. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. So I'm not using very much. And the 200 watt system has been fine. And in fact, it's coming up on October. Mid-October, I will have been living in this box for 3 years. How about that? I can't believe it. It doesn't seem like that long. It seems shorter. But yeah, 3 years I've been living in this RV. Off-grid for most of the year. Haven't been dependent upon an electrical grid except for a couple of times in the summer there. This last summer, I was definitely dependent on it being in Kingman because it would get to 104, 105 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which is quite hot. And I had a little portable air conditioner in here that was vented through my roof vent. And that worked fine. It kept a nice cool bubble in the living space here. But other than that, I'm off-grid most of the time. Not dependent upon the power grid. If we had a big solar storm and it knocked out the electrical grid, I'd have to catch it in the news. I wouldn't be aware of it. What else can I talk about living in the RV? Since I've been in it for 3 years. It's not a permanent vacation. Every now and then I get somebody that comments that I'm on a permanent vacation. Well, you can go home from a vacation. This is home. And unlike your home, I don't have pipes and wires coming to it. I don't have unlimited natural gas for heat or unlimited water or an unlimited sewage line taking away my waste. I have to obtain the resources that you take for granted in a house. It's work. I have to find a place to park. It's work. It's actually, in some ways, it's a little more stressful than living in a house. There are benefits, obviously. The scene outside my window changes every time I move. Inside, I always feel like I'm home, but when I step out the door, the world changes outside, and the scenery changes, the geography changes, the wildlife changes. I love that. I love the different sounds and different smells of different geographical areas. Seeing the different types of insects and birds and animals that are around. There's roadrunners running around here, different bird sounds. The desert, though, it's so quiet, especially at night. It's absolutely dead silent. I can sit outside and maybe hear one or two crickets off in the distance. But other than that, the only sound is my own breathing. Some people might find that disconcerting. I find that absolutely a relief. I have no background. When I'm in the cities, I can't tell what's around me because it's just a mass of chaos and motion and color and sound. It's like standing under a waterfall and trying to breathe. It's just. I've always had that problem ever since I was a kid. Distracted by everything, every sound, and being in a city, it's just this engulfing chaos that weighs down on me. And when I get out here to the desert and it's so quiet and so peaceful, it's like, oh, I never want to live in a city again. I could spend the rest of my life out here and be absolutely fine with it. The other thing about RV life that I wanted to talk about, and I've noticed actually in the news stories are starting to pop up about people taking their RVs back to dealers and selling them. There's a lot of people now that got into the RV lifestyle 2 or 3 years ago when van life was exploding on social media, and they've been out living it for a year or two and said enough of this, and they're going back to houses. It's not for everybody. Last year, in fact, when I posted that I was coming down here to my quiet spot in Quartzsite, where I could be alone for a while, and let me define that. There are people around me. Other people park in this area, but I don't know any of them. We're cordial when we pass each other on the trail or whatever. Good morning, hi, how are you doing? Nice day. Yeah, that, and occasionally somebody will have a campfire, and several of us will bring our chairs over and sit around the fire. But generally, I'm completely alone here. And I had a guy last year when I mentioned I was coming here who was just horrified at that idea. He said, in a comment, he said, "You'll be completely alone? That's terrible. Why would anybody do that to themselves?" Well, he's not the personality type that would live the RV lifestyle. You have to be okay with being alone with yourself. You just have to, because there's going to be times, even if you're one of those that goes RV park to RV park, there's going to be times where there's nobody around you that you know. None of your friends are there. It's just you, or maybe you and your spouse, and that's it. And you have to be okay with that, or this lifestyle is definitely not for you. It would be nothing but stress. And I am not like that. I am totally fine with being on my own. I find it restful, recharging, relaxing. There is a limit, I mean, when I get to the end of November and I head down to hang out with the Rat Pack, I'll be ready to hang around with my friends again. But for now, I'm fine with it. I enjoy it. But you do have to be able to be okay with being alone with yourself if you're going to live in an RV. That just comes with it, and you got to be okay with that. If you're a couple living in an RV, you have to be really comfortable with each other, because you're going to be in each other's face most of the time. Unlike at a house, like when I was married, the basement was my domain. I could go down to my shop in the basement. My wife would be upstairs doing whatever in the kitchen or watching TV or whatever. And I had my space to go to be alone. But if you're living in an RV, and especially in a van, and you're a couple, you're going to be in each other's face all the time. So you have got to be completely, totally comfortable with each other, wanting to be together, because you're going to be together all the time. It's just the way it's going to be. And in fact, in the news here lately, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the saga of that girl Gabby and Brian that were van lifers, and Gabby's death, and now the hunt for Brian. If you are not able to get along with each other, don't go live in a van. It's going to make things a lot worse. So yeah, there's that. I've met a lot of people out here that live in RVs and vans that are couples or even families, and you can tell that they are really close, that they're really, really close, really comfortable, really happy to be together, and that's why it's working for them. And then I've met people that are solo and very much a hermit. One guy, on another ham, Steve, I can't remember his call offhand, but he spent a lot of his younger adult life living on a sailboat. And you want to talk about isolation. If you're sailing on a sailboat and you're out there in the ocean, yeah, that's isolation. But I could tell he's totally comfortable with that. And he lives on his own in his RV. He's got a little dog. But that's his life. He just travels around and hangs out with people when he wants to. Well, I don't know what happened there, but my camera stopped recording video. So I'll just end it here. This week I'll be working on the U-Loop clone. We're going to get that fixed up. So that'll be the next video, and we'll see you then. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, click to subscribe. Join us on the Facebook channel for discussion about the videos. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please click to support me on my Patreon page.